What's up, everybody? Bill Tendo back here again. If you want, like and subscribe, cool. If not, nah, whatever. We're just going to do a bunch of real quick Nintendo 64 facts and accessories and things like that you may not know. And just know that most of this list was compiled by my good friend, Quest Guy, on Twitter. So here we go. 64 Dahaken Tamagotchi Mina de Tamagotchi World is a party video game developed by Bandai and Hudson Soft for Nintendo 64. Released only in Japan on December 1997, it is a virtual board game based on the Tamagotchi toy. This was the first game by Bandai on the N64, and it's the only Tamagotchi branded game on the system. The game is won by being the player to advance and reach the end first by raising the Tamagotchi to adult Tachi stage. The game has almost no English, so be ready to translate with a couple friends. On June 10, 1998, Quest 64 debuted in North and South America, also Canada. Though it was developed by Japan-based Imagineer, it made its appearance in North and South America and was heavily marketed as the first traditional RPG on the system, helping it sell over 500,000 copies. It's actually pretty amazing. Now, Tetris 64 is a puzzle video game for the Nintendo 64. It was released only in English in Japan in 98 and is the only Nintendo 64 game that works with the biosensor accessory, which came included with the game. The game was praised for its multiplayer mode and was at the time the only Nintendo 64 Tetris game, which allowed 4-player mode. Plus, another plus about this one is mostly in English, so very accessible for people outside the Japan market. I want to add to that the biosensor is just a really cool thing to have. It plugs into a controller, into a memory card slot, and it clips onto the tip of your finger. It doesn't work super great, but it's interesting, super interesting. The Pelican N64 Tilt Pack is a combination rumble and motion sensing controller plug-in that uses a gyro to sense your actions. The Tilt Pack has sensitivity controls to adjust and control differences in, say, a racing game like Beetle Adventure Racing and a flying shooter like Rogue Squadron. Also, the X and Y axes can be calibrated to make the controller behave more like a steering wheel, for example, or lack of a better term, a turntable. It didn't work as great like this, but if you held your controller flat and turned this way, it plugged into the Rumble Pack spot. Cool little accessory. April 2nd of the year 2000, Toy Story 2 was released on the Nintendo 64 in PAL territories. That's going to be all of Europe and Australia. One of the enemies was censored in the European release due to it looking like a stereotypical Mexican bandito. They censored the character by turning his hair blonde, his hat white, and gave him different clothes. A protest after the 1999 North American release with more than 150 people was held outside Activision's headquarters. Activision and Disney stated that the character's appearance would be altered in future copies of the game, but already printed copies would not be pulled. That makes sense. Center Court Tennis is a tennis game for the Nintendo 64 released in 1999 in Europe. It was released under the name Let's Smash in Japan in 1998. Famitsu rated it 27 out of 40. X64 magazine rated it 80%, and Consoles Plus rated it at 89%. In true Hudson style, center court tennis is familiarly Japanese and cartoony in appearance. And while this arcade style tennis at heart, the game has a surprising amount of technical depth that makes for some thrilling gameplay. Now, that being said, this is actually the best tennis game on Nintendo 64. A Japanese cartridge will work in an American console. There's just 2 pieces of plastic in the way. Everyone should have their console modded by now. It's so simple. Anyone can do it. There's a video way back on my page on how to do that, so definitely check that out. Mahjong Haruki Classic is a board game developed by Alpha Unit and published by Imagineer, the same people that brought you Quest 64, which was released in Japan in 1997. It's one of a handful of Mahjong games released on the Nintendo 64 in Japan only. There isn't a translated ROM, and it's kind of an uncommon game to find. So my favorite thing about this game, because I find it absolutely wild. Let me see if I'm going to pull it up on screen for a second, because the truth is, hold on, it is the absolute only Nintendo 64 or even Nintendo game that I have found. This guy is smoking a cigarette on the cover of this sticker. And it's hard to see here, but there's a cigarette in his mouth. Straight gangster. They didn't even care. Gangster. Thank you, Mike Fink. So let's pop on. Okay, let's pop on to another accessory called the TriStar 64. It was an accessory built for the Nintendo 64 that was developed in Hong Kong, China. With the TriStar 64, people could play their Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo, on the Nintendo 64. Players have complained that the graphics quality severely deteriorates when using the accessory. This, coupled with the fact that the game cartridges with a coprocessor wouldn't work on it, that made the TriStar 64 unpopular. So it's this little black piece of plastic, basically, little machine that sits on top of your Nintendo 64, plugs into the cartridge slot. You can plug an NES game into it, a Super Famicom or Super Nintendo game into it, and a Nintendo 64. There's 3 different slots to plug in 3 different games at just one time on here. And yes, it would your Nintendo 64 games would look absolutely horrible on this. The NES games would look okay, but the Nintendo 64 looked bad. Super Nintendo looked pretty good. We're going to do one more game today, and we're going to talk about a Japan-only release, SimCity 2000 for Nintendo 64 on January 30th, 1998, produced and published again by Imagineer. Quest 64, Let's Smash Tennis. They were killing it on Nintendo 64. There was also SimCity 64 released on the 64DD, rendered in all 3D polygons. So SimCity 2000 was only released for Nintendo 64 in Japan only. It is a Japan exclusive. It's a great game. It's a lot of fun. You should check it out. Check out some of these games. Check out some of these accessories. What is your favorite one that we talked about? Let me know in the comments below. I personally try to respond to everybody. So y'all have a great day, and thanks.